to OSU's Professional and Continuing Education's The State of Mobile and Digital Marketing, presented by Rachel Freeman. This webinar is being hosted as a precursory or a promotion for our digital brand management courses. The next course, starting on August 24th, is our Social Media, Mobile, and Reputation Management course. It is a 7-week online-only course that actually features the wonderful digital marketing expert Rachel Freeman. This course will focus on social media strategies, mobile marketing, and of course reputation management and crisis situations. You can learn more about the course and the program by visiting our website, pace.oregonstate.edu/social media. And of course, you can contact me. My name is Amanda Geldof. I am the project or program manager for all of the digital brand courses. And with that, I will let Rachel take it away to introduce herself and give you a little bit about her background.
Great, thanks Amanda. So good morning everyone, and thank you for joining us today to talk about the state of mobile in 2015. My name is Rachel Freeman, and I've been on the digital marketing scene for about 10 years now. Most of my career has been on the agency side, helping clients with their SEO, paid search, social media, and analytics strategies. And now I'm on the other side working in-house at a company called Jive Software. So without further ado, we are going to go ahead and dive in and get started. So what are people talking about today when they talk about the future of mobile? This is really a big topic and one that could go a lot of different directions. But in a nutshell, specifically as it pertains to search and consumer behavior, is that the idea of mobile as we know it is over, and we aren't really going online anymore. The search experience is really a lot more fluid and happens across devices and is more integrated into our daily activities, like standing in line at the grocery store or Googling that recipe and emailing it to yourself from your phone while you're sitting on the couch watching the Food Network. So this quote I really think sums it up nicely, in that mobile is over. I think it's just a screen. You'll absolutely need a screen, but you'll need more than one. Sort of as we're navigating throughout our day, we certainly move from device to device. So moving on to the next slide. On our phones, we do more than just check the time, text a spouse, or catch up with friends. We really turn to our phones with intent, and we expect brands to deliver immediate answers. Because of this shifting behavior, brands need to get in the minds of their target audience to really understand how, and to understand when, and to understand where they are consuming information and intently seeking information about products and services you might have to offer. So we hear a lot of stats today about just how big mobile is, and what does that really mean. I think a lot of people have heard the stat that there more people have smartphones in the world than they do toothbrushes. Well, what does that mean for brands today? What does that mean in actuality as we're developing our digital strategies and trying to create a more seamless experience to map with the times? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Next slide. So I just mentioned the idea of intent in this previous slide, and this is one critical reason why this is so important. So 55% of consumers using mobile to research want to purchase within the hour. These people are ready to do something. But I also don't want you to think, with this specific stat, that this is just specific to e-commerce companies. Users are turning to their phones to find directions, look up recipes, sign up for webinars, etc. So if you aren't visible here, or you're really missing a huge opportunity. And furthermore, if you are visible but providing, maybe a bad user experience, it's probably hurting your brand even more than not being visible at all. So it's really important to think about this idea of intent, specifically as it relates to mobile. If you put yourself in think about how you use your own device during the day. Usually you're going to your device to do a search for a very specific reason. Next slide, please. So key trends in mobile. According to a 2015 white paper from ComScore, more than 3/4 of all digital consumers in the United States aged 18 and older are now classified as multi-platform users. Moreover, 21% of millennials access the internet exclusively from mobile devices. That stat alone, I'll say it again just to let it sink in, 21% of millennials access the internet exclusively from their mobile devices. That's huge. And smartphone penetration still is growing at an astonishing rate. And we're going to talk about this idea of micromoments because I think that this is a specifically key trend in mobile right now. It's something that Google's really focusing on, and I think really helps to think about micromoments for brands in this capacity to really get in front of your audience and think about how we can start formulating our digital strategies around these trends. Next slide, please. So what are micromoments? These are the new digital reflexes that have sort of ended the act of going online. As I mentioned previously, search is becoming so much more integrated throughout our day-to-day. No longer are we, going into the office and dialing up to get online to spend a few hours on the internet. It's no longer this dedicated time in our day. It just happens throughout the day across our various activities. Next slide, please. So mobile has really fractured the consumer journey into hundreds of real-time, very intent-driven micro-moments. And each represent an opportunity for brands to really shape preference and consumer action, and also to improve brand loyalty and trust. So let's talk about a few examples of micro-moments. Of leisure travelers who are smartphone users, 69% search for travel ideas during spare moments. So for example, when they're standing in line or waiting for the bus, and then nearly half of those travelers go on to through an entirely separate channel. So maybe they were thinking they were going to find whatever information they were looking for from Expedia because that's where they normally go. They searched from their phone. They found that Kayak did a way better job, gave them information that they were actually looking for, and made it really easy for them to complete a specific action. So that's a really compelling statistic. Furthermore, 91% look up information on their smartphones while in the middle of a task. So you could be reading a book or you could be doing something for work. You realize you forgot to do something or make a reservation. You pick up your smartphone and you just get it done. 82% consult their phones while they're standing in a store deciding which product to buy. And then 1 in 10 of those end up buying a different product than they had planned. I can tell you I do this all the time. I have an 8-month-old daughter and I'm constantly in just completely overwhelmed in the store trying to decide, which product to go over another. I want to look at reviews. All of a sudden I have some safety concern I didn't even know existed. So, people are really looking to their phones to kind of back up their purchase decision in the moment right then. They need to know whether or not they should move forward with the purchase. Of online consumers, 69% agree that the quality timing or relevance of a company's message influences their perception of a brand. So, like I said, this is a really great opportunity to get in front of your audience and to increase that brand loyalty and that brand trust. If you're getting in front of them in the right way at the right time, consumers remember that, and they'll remember that experience, and they'll be more likely to be more loyal moving forward. Next slide, please. So more on these micro moments. The way that Google is kind of talking about them today are these I want to know moments, or I want to go, or I want to do, I want to buy. There could be a ton of different examples, but again, just the more interesting tidbits of information. 66% of smartphone users turned to their phone to look up something when they saw in a TV commercial. Two times, there's a twofold increase in near me related searches in the past year. So users are searching on their phones when they're out and about. They're looking for a coffee shop right next to them. They're looking for a good place to have lunch. They're expecting, they're searching near me type related queries because they're expecting relevant information to come up. They have this expectation from brands, from companies to cater to them. So if we aren't doing it, they're going to go elsewhere to brands that are. 100 million hours or more of how-to content have been watched on YouTube so far this year. A lot of people don't know that YouTube is actually the second largest search engine after Google, and that how-to content is huge. So as we're thinking about our brand strategies and our content marketing and what type of content produce it's going to get in front of our audience, how-to is huge, and thinking about the different formats and the different channels. So in some cases it might be a blog post to most effectively get your point across. In other cases it might be quicker and easier and a better user experience overall to do a video. So really rethinking about not only how you capture users on smartphone devices, but in what format is gonna provide the best user experience. And then these I want to buy moments. So consulting your smartphone while you're in the store deciding what to buy. There's been a 29% increase in mobile conversion rates in the past year. Reviews are a huge opportunity. So on the next slide, I'll try to put it into a little bit more of an actionable way to look at things. So despite these trends, these moments that matter, that are very intent rich, 98% of companies aren't set up to identify, deliver, or measure on these moments of intent. I don't think that companies have really caught up to start thinking about these micro moments as that specifically relates to their brand. We all know that these things are happening in theory, but and we know that because we are ourselves engaging in that manner. But how does that relate to a brand? How does that relate to a trickier situation if you're on the B2B side of things? Or how are people consuming information? They're not necessarily buying into a piece of software on their mobile device, but they may be interacting with your content. They may be doing some research and reading and starting to develop that brand loyalty and brand trust because they're trying to get up to speed on their daily commute on the subway, for example. So really there's a huge opportunity to start thinking about these micro moments and identifying what those are for your specific brand, developing content strategies around them, making sure that mobile experience is really strong, and developing systems and processes in place to measure those moments of intent and measure that success. Next slide, please. So how do you win from these micro moments? And I think that we could have dedicated sessions on all of these topics. But if you think about it in the way that we've been talking about them so far today, so if the micro moment is what is the closest coffee shop or restaurant. If you have a brick and mortar store, local search engine optimization is an actionable thing that you can do to improve that experience and increase visibility to make sure that you have the right address listed, and that when I'm doing a search, even though it's not very safe, at a stoplight to get directions to the store, that your Google Place page is updated with the right address, and that I don't get lost trying to find it. I want to buy, so providing product and service information that's easily accessible from a mobile device. I mentioned YouTube how-to content, and then what is the best? So just thinking about reviews, making sure that those reviews are visible on places like Yelp and on Google reviews, so that that information is being found and people can really trust that information that they're finding. Moving forward. So I think it's pretty straightforward and obvious to most that users really start with search. The majority of mobile consumers use search in the shopping process. So 74% searched on a mobile using a search engine. What this means at the end of the day is that mobile search engine optimization is going to be the key to the success for your brand, and it's really kind of mission critical and a foundational element to be able to succeed in this space. So next slide. Google has really made some recent strides over the past few years. I think that they've really attempted to push mobile and the importance of mobile, but a lot of times what happens, at least in the search industry, is that Google leads the way with what they want to happen in the space by basically cracking down with these major algorithmic updates. So for example, the Panda algorithm cracking down on thin content or low quality sites, or Penguin algorithm updates cracking down on leak spams, so that it's harder for black hat SEOs to game the system, is really forcing webmasters, SEOs, content marketers to up their game from a quality perspective and to improve the overall user experience. So leading up to April 21st of 2015, this mobile algorithm update that was expected was very, very widely anticipated, called Mobilegeddon. It was really blown out of the water. It was a very big deal, and a lot of people were very concerned about what was going to happen when April 21st came. And as a result, Google actually saw an overall 5% increase in mobile-friendly sites during March and April, because people were just scrambling to make sure that they had a mobile-friendly site so that they didn't get dinged by their getting their mobile rankings penalized in search. So basically there was this mass hysteria, and ultimately April 21st came. The results weren't as significant as sort of expected, but it got a lot of press and a lot of visibility. A lot of people were really paying attention and started to realize, like, hey, we really need to be taking this mobile thing seriously. Not only does it represent a huge opportunity for us, if we don't do it, we'll probably get penalized in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not directly, but maybe indirectly. So that was a huge push from Google to improve the mobile experience. So on the next slide, just some high-level mobile SEO best practices. Again, making sure that user experience is first and foremost, and that also comes in the form of page speed. So, if you're on the go and you're trying to search for something on your smartphone, you expect a fast experience. You want those pages to load quickly. You don't want to have to deal with a bunch of flash. Designing for the fact and that, making sure that it's easy to select on drop-down navigations, and the user has an overall very clean experience. Responsive web design is critical in that users are using lots of different devices in lots of different sizes, so making sure that your site is responsively fitting to each of these screens is key. And then, of course, basics like optimizing title and meta descriptions, and thinking about from the user experience too, when you are updating these titles and meta descriptions, to keep them really short and concise. You're working with a very limited amount of space on a mobile device, so those search results are cut off even more so than you would see on a standard desktop. You really don't have a lot of content to work with. So making sure that messaging is very short and concise, so you get your point across and encourage organic click-through rates. Moving on to the next slide, I wanted to talk a little bit about app usage. A lot of brands aren't totally sure, at what point do I just make sure my website is mobile friendly? Or do I develop an app? How do I know what the best route to go is? And by no means would I, say that a company should create an app just to create an app. It really does have to provide a specific purpose, has to, provide use and help or information, or be something engaging to the user and be very relevant. And you also have to think about what's going to be the reason that users of your app are going to return. So making you have that aspect of retention dialed, so that users don't just download it and say, oh, this is interesting, and then never come back to your app. That would be a huge waste of resources that would go into developing that app in the first place. So what we're really seeing here in consumption behavior is that not only do apps continue to dominate the mobile web, but they're really dominating the percentage of time spent on the mobile web on mobile devices versus a traditional mobile website. So really, users are spending so much more time, as opposed to doing a search in Google. They might search in Google on their phone to provide quick answers and get information fast, but where they're really engaging with brands and where they're really spending a lot of time are in apps that are specific to a business. So that's something to think about, and it's only increasing over time. So, one thing that you can do, we talked about, high-level SEO best practices for your mobile site, but there's also best practices that you can consider and implement for App Store optimization. This is important to drive more downloads, to get found in App Store search more frequently, to beat out your competition, because not a lot of companies think to do this, and to increase your rank and visibility for specific keywords, again, in App Store search. I found that, again, not a lot of people are actively optimizing their App Store. So this is a huge opportunity to increase visibility and drive those downloads and increase engagement from that perspective. And there are lots of things that you could do to even further that. So there are a lot of, you can do a lot of advertising surrounding app downloads. There are a lot of opportunities to increase your visibility, increase usage from that perspective. Next slide, please. So how do you optimize apps? Most of the best practices are pretty straightforward, but mainly making sure that you have a descriptive title and description. You're making use of the keyword fields. You have some really nice, clean screenshots and an icon to increase the click-through rate, and that you have things like social proof in the form of ratings and reviews. Social proof has been known to increase the likelihood of increasing more engagement and conversions when you see your friends have also liked a given product or app. Then they are more likely to try them out themselves. So here's just an example of keywords in the title within App Store. And this specific study saw a 10% ranking increase just by being descriptive in the title of your app. So it's not rocket science. It's just a matter of making sure that you remember to do those things in the setup process. Next slide, please. So I mentioned advertising as an opportunity for App Store app promotion, but advertising money follows audiences. So mobile will be 15% of US ad revenue in 2018. So you can see on this graph here how small of a percentage that was in 2013, and the rate of growth by 2018. So it's growing rapidly, and there's a reason it's growing rapidly. So this is a great space to be in, and especially get in now while it's relatively affordable and before your competitors are really engaging in this space. Because I'll say that, at least from my experience, that I don't think that companies have really caught up to mobile advertising spend in terms of making sure that money gets built into their budgets in terms of where they need to be right now. They're very behind on just making sure that their advertising teams can actually play in that space and can actually have some visibility on mobile devices, and I think that can be a mistake in some situations. Next slide, please. So again, mobile advertising is just exploding, and you can see the difference here between the forecast of digital advertising revenue between mobile and non-mobile from 2013 to 2018. And there are a lot of different ways that you can advertise. There are some really Google AdWords makes it really easy to launch campaigns on mobile devices. You can do app advertising. There's Facebook advertising. You can drive app downloads through Facebook. Remarketing is going to increase your likelihood that users will convert, because you can target folks who have already been to your site. You know that they have an interest in your products or services, and you can serve them an ad later on when they're browsing the web. So there are lots of different ways to explore that, and I think it's a matter of making sure that if you're in-house, it's about building the case with some of these stats that your audience is here, and that it's a huge missed opportunity. And again, your competition isn't really there as much as they should be, most likely. So it's great to get in now while it's still affordable, and it's an easy win. Next slide, please. So what are the main takeaways? Begin by exploring your brand's relevant micro moments. It's going to be different depending on, what your brand is really focusing on. It's not necessarily always going to be a cut and dried answer as to what those micro moments are. But I think if you start thinking about it in that capacity, it would help to kind of map it out to say, like, what would these micro moments be, and how do we then potentially create some content or make sure that we're getting in front of users this way, knowing that this is likely the way that they are engaging, you know, from different, you can do surveys, you can mine your analytics. There are lots of ways that you can kind of dig in to get to the bottom of what these micro moments might be and how your content and advertising strategy might be molded around these. One example would be, a pizza delivery company. They could see in their analytics that search demand, starts spiking. And I think we all know that search demand starts spiking around 4, 5, 6 p.m. It's probably going to be higher on the weekends. Make sure that your advertising strategy is such that maybe you aren't, maybe you're only running at 25% during the day, but you're really increasing bids and increasing your spend later on in the day, and that if someone's searching for their mobile device, that you can serve them an ad around that time. Well, maybe they're running errands or picking up their kids after work and after school. So really thinking about it from that perspective. Mobile optimization user experience is just mission critical. It's not something that brands can really get away with anymore in terms of not having a mobile friendly site. It's just really going to hurt that brand loyalty and trust if you're providing a bad experience. And it's pretty easy to figure out if you need to improve that. And then just seek to create a more seamless experience across the various touch points, knowing that we're going from our desktops to tablets to phones throughout the day, and we aren't necessarily starting our search over. We're just continuing it from a different device. And as I mentioned, mobile advertising representing a huge competitive advantage in most cases, and something that's just now we're just scratching the surface on right now. On the next slide, I've also included a couple of helpful resources. So if you are needing to help, build a business case internally, calculating the full value of mobile, Google has a couple cool tools. You can also check to see if your website is mobile friendly by just plugging in the URL into this tool. And then more high-level trends from Mashable I thought were interesting, much more futuristic and forward-thinking about wearable devices and things of that nature, and more specifics surrounding how to build a mobile-friendly site. So that is it from me. Are there any questions? I will give it a few minutes for anyone to submit questions, and happy to help out, and if not, that's okay too.
Okay, it looks like Ashley is asking, what kind of app would you recommend for us to market OSU to international audiences?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think you could go obviously a lot of different directions. As I mentioned before, I would want to think about, what's going to increase the likelihood that this specific audience is going to keep coming back. I would imagine that, as in prospective student thinking about maybe coming to OSU, studying abroad. They would be really interested in, obviously the curriculum and the program, but I think a lot of it would be around just experience-wise. So if there was a way to, create a compelling app that had information about um, the university and what's going on in Corvallis or in Portland in the Pacific Northwest, where prospective audiences could really engage and understand how, as a student, they could immerse themselves in the community. That would be kind of one direction you could start to take. But again, it would also depend on, what your ultimate goals are. I'm assuming ultimately you'd want enrollment, but that with an app and this sort of kind of trickier quote unquote conversion process, you'd be hitting them earlier in the funnel where they're sort of just doing more of their education and research. And maybe at this point they know they kind of want to be in Pacific Northwest, maybe not, maybe they want to be in a Pac-10 school, really figuring out what their key interests are, most likely to pull them in, and thinking about it from that perspective.
Then Michael said thanks. And we have Kristen is asking, when does the next class start? Actually, that is in just a couple of weeks on August 24th. You can register on the website at pace.oregonstate.edu/social media. And registration should remain open for at least those 2 weeks. We have Amy asking, do you mind talking a bit about the upcoming course you're teaching in terms? So the upcoming course is actually broken into 3 different modules. We have a social media section, which is being taught by Phil Newman from Nike. Then we have our mobile section, which is being taught by Rachel here. And then we have our final reputation management section being taught by Elena Joy of Creative up in Portland. So Rachel can speak a little bit about the content she plans on covering during her module of mobile.
Yeah, so within the course, we'll basically be touching on some of the things we talked about today, but getting a little bit more granular into each of these topics. Because, there's a lot that we can be going into, but I think, to get the most out of these types of courses is how do you apply that in your day-to-day. So digging in a lot more to, what makes a good mobile experience, talking more in depth about, to Ashley's question about, what kind of app could OSU use, is having some exercises designed to kind of start thinking about that in the form of various businesses and what that might look like kind of in the trenches.
Okay, perfect. And then I'll cover a little bit about the social media and reputation management. The social media section, you will work on developing a social media strategy for our case study client, which is Positive Energy Beverages. And you'll learn the ins and outs and do's and don'ts and trying to create a campaign for them specifically. And then, of course, you'll talk about which social media channels are going to be the best given the audience that you're trying to reach, the messaging that you're trying to get out there, etc. The reputation management side is a little bit more on the crisis communications and trying to ensure that your brand remains in a positive view as far as your audience is concerned. Trying to give them as good of an experience as possible while building that trust and maintaining a level of professionalism or personality that your client or your company has already established. Each of these modules will, come together and you'll turn in a final assignment for each one that you can use in a portfolio or you can transition to your own company. And it's really very real world experience that you can't get with most courses. Do we have any other questions? Okay. I don't think we're going to have any more come through. So, oh, we have a thank you from Megan. Sorry, I saw it pop up and just, okay. We have from Amy, if most of my clients are nonprofits, would you deter me from the course or is that really okay? Actually, nonprofits, we had a nonprofit case study client for last year's course or courses, which turned out really great. In fact, they're one of our happier customers. And these courses and what you learn in them can really be applied to virtually any type of company. Our case study client for the upcoming course is an e-commerce and retail focused company, but the concepts covered and everything can be applied to nonprofits just the same with a little bit of modifications in there. And if you have any specific questions because your situation is more nonprofit oriented or slightly different from anything presented in the course, our instructors are really great about digging in and trying to give you as much information as possible, because our goal is to give you the experience in more than just theory. We want you to be able to apply everything that you've learned in your life. That's the point of continuing education. We don't want to just send you off with, well, I read this article and here we go. It doesn't quite work so well. We want you to get the practice. We want you to be able to use this as soon as you learn it.
Yeah, I think I'll just chime in there too. I mentioned in the PowerPoint, some stats surrounding, e-commerce examples, and a lot of times, at least in my experience, when I'm, reading articles or seeing speakers, everything sounds really great and really motivational. And a lot of times, e-com can be easier to talk about because you can a lot of times more easily measure it, and it's just much more straightforward. But when it comes to things like nonprofit, for your example, the B2B space, and that conversion funnel could be 6 to 8 months long, and the experience is totally different. What do you do in those types of situations? So as Amanda mentioned, we really tried to make sure that you're learning fundamentals that can be provided or applied to a lot of different industries. And providing real-world examples so you can kind of wrap your head around what that might look like in different scenarios. And again, we're here to answer more specific questions. If you're just like, I don't see how this pertains to me, what would I do in this specific situation? Because that's kind of the hardest part, I think, about search in this industry is just when you go back to your desk, what's the first thing that you do? We want to make sure that you have those takeaways.
And we have Shirley saying thank you as well. Okay, we'll give it another minute for any other questions that may trickle in. Okay, I think I'll risk saying it again. That looks like the end of our questions. So with that, we will say thank you for attending the webinar. Um, Again, the website to access any more information about the courses or the entire digital brand management program is at pace.oregonstate.edu/social media. If you have any specific questions, feel free to reach out to us. The email address is learn@oregonstate.edu. And my name is Amanda Geldof. I'd be happy to help answer any questions you may have or point you in the right direction. Thank you so much, Rachel, for presenting and taking the time out to do this. And I look forward to hearing everything you have to say in the upcoming course.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.